Hi, everybody. I'm Neil from the Your Grey Matters podcast. Welcome back. And this week we have a barn buster for you. This is serious. We're talking about our safety. A non-partisan discussion with Member of Parliament Larry Brock. Are you safe in Canada today? Do we need bail reform? And let me introduce to you my son, the producer of our show, the brains behind this show, Jason. Hi, Jason.
Hey, Dad, how you doing?
Fantastic.
Good. Yeah, it's been a minute since I've been on, and I just thought, as the producer and video editor of the show, I would come on to talk about a slight technical snafu we had with this episode. While Neil's video recorded properly, unfortunately, MP Brock's video did not. But we've got audio for him, completely great audio. You don't want to miss what he has to say. And I've done some things to jazz it up so it's still visually exciting. You know, it reminds me of quite a few years ago, many years ago, when a major American television network had an interview with Bill Gates, who was still at the head of Microsoft at the time. And something happened during that interview, and it came out in black and white. So, it happens to everybody. Yeah, and I think we want to talk about how MP Brock is part of something really important right now as well.
Yes, we do. MP Brock is spearheading a very important bail reform petition, and he's actually crisscrossing our country this summer talking about our safety through bail reform. You need to sign his petition. You need to realize that safety is for all of us. It doesn't have to be a partisan issue. It simply is not.
Yeah, so you would have seen the link to that petition on screen if you're watching this on YouTube. There'll be a link, of course, in the show notes for anybody who isn't watching on YouTube. And even if you are watching on YouTube, it'll be a handy link to click. You really do need to sign that petition. Other than that, I think we've taken up enough of everybody's time. Thanks so much to all of our new subscribers. Thanks for telling people about it. Thanks for commenting. We really enjoy reading your comments. And other than that, I think it's time for MP Brock, would you say?
I would say, let's roll.
Welcome to Your Grey Matters, the podcast that unveils the miracles already amongst us. Here, we believe that the human mind cannot be defeated. Tune in to discover the fascinating people with extraordinary stories, innovative products, and groundbreaking services. With your host, Neil Silvert, who's earned his gray hair and still has use of his gray matter.
Hi, everybody. I'm Neil from the Your Grey Matters podcast. I'm your host. Thank you for coming out. You know that our podcast is about great people who we have in our world, what they do, and how they do it. And also, as you know, tremendous disruptive technologies. But tonight, we're really excited. We have on with us MP Larry Brock. Larry, welcome to the Your Grey Matters podcast.
Thank you, Neil. Happy to be here.
And we are thrilled to have you. Everybody, I want to tell you, Larry's someone with a front row seat to both the legal system and the legislative process. He's a former Crown attorney, a passionate advocate for justice reform, and currently serves as a member of Parliament for Brantford, Brant South, Six Nations. MP Larry Brock was first elected to the House of Commons on September 20th, 2021. As the Member of Parliament for Brantford Brant, he was re-elected just this past April to represent the newly formed riding of Brantford, Brant South, Six Nations, as I said before. He currently, and this is the right thing, Larry currently serves as the Shadow Minister for Justice and the Attorney General of Canada. He has a bachelor's degree from the University of Waterloo and a law degree from the University of Calgary. Before being elected, he was the Assistant Crown Attorney for Brant. He's a lifelong resident of Brant, and Larry has demonstrated strong leadership and commitment to his family, community, and public service, having served as the chair of the board of the Crossing All Bridges Learning Center, which helps adults with developmental difficulties succeed in education, employment, and independent living. He was president of St. Leonard's Community Services, which provides justice, employment, youth, and family addiction and mental health services. And in 2015, he served as chair of the United Way campaign, which raised more than $1.6 million for local charities. Larry and his wife Angela are the proud parents of 16-year-old twin daughters, Jenny and Emma, who are active members of the Brantford Aquatic Club. Larry, you have twin teenage daughters and you're doing all that you do. My hat's off to you. Uh,
It's a
I,
challenge.
it is. I want everyone to join us in welcoming Mr. Larry Brock to the Your Grey Matters podcast. Larry, thanks for coming on.
Yes, again, thank you for having me, Neil. I'm looking forward to our discussion.
Well, I have to tell you that I want to dive into the justice issues that should matter to every Canadian, not just some, every Canadian. And I want you to know that this show is a follow up to your recent, really wonderful podcast with Ryan and Tanya Davies at the Northern Perspectives podcast. And we're sending out a shout out to these two great Canadians who are working every day for a better Canada. Now, Larry, you've been one of the strongest voices in Parliament pushing for bail reform. You have called it a national safety issue, and crime is constantly rising under the Liberals. We never saw this level of crime under Prime Minister Stephen Harper. Can you please discuss bail reform, why you're speaking across Canada about this, and by the way, what's been the response to you and the petition?
Sure. Thanks, Neil. There's a lot to unpack here. I'm trying to be as brief and concise as possible, but you're absolutely correct that we are seeing crime levels that did not happen under the leadership of Prime Minister Stephen Harper. It spiked before Prime Minister Harper. It went down because of policies and legislative changes made to the criminal code, which prioritized, as should every federal government, prioritize the safety of Canadians. That is Parliament's number one role in terms of exercising its duties to Canadians. And we saw that complete decrease in the level of criminal activity because that small band of repeat violent offenders, and we're talking about a small class, Neil, of individuals who simply have chosen a criminal lifestyle as their choice of employment, so to speak, their career choice, so to speak. And these small bands of individuals can be found in every community, town, and city right across this country. I'm not talking about the 85 to 90% of all individuals who happen to make bad choices, happen to make repeated bad choices in some cases, be at the wrong place at the wrong time, find themselves getting in conflict with the law, going through the system, learning about that experience, and being deterred not to do it again. That's the vast majority of citizens who get themselves involved in the criminal justice system. But I'm not talking about that class. I'm talking about that small class of repeat violent offenders that seem to have flourished in their choice of activity under the leadership of former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, and now to start off in the first few months of the administration of Prime Minister Mark Carney. So what is happening is that the Liberal policies have prioritized the rights and privileges of the offender at the expense of the victims and, generally speaking, our communities. StatsCan released a report last week regarding 2024 numbers. We used to talk about spikes in violent crime and spikes in gun crime and spikes in homicides and sexual assaults and extortion. We used those numbers from 2023. The numbers in 2024, Neil, have increased substantially all across those particular areas. And if I could highlight one province, the province of Quebec, I don't know what's happening in that province, but violent crime went from just in the low 50 percentile in 2023 to almost 65% increase over 1 year in the province of Quebec in 2024. Here we are, 6 months into 2025, and I'm not seeing any abatement whatsoever in terms of criminal activity. All you have to do is turn on the radio, watch your favorite news program on TV, pick up a newspaper, read it online, and you're just seeing example after example right across this country of criminality gone amok. And we're getting to the point where citizens are absolutely terrified to enjoy the simple things in life, going for a walk at night, going for a walk in the middle of the daytime, buying a nice vehicle to carve their dreams and leaving it in the driveway, not knowing whether or not it's going to be there in the morning, going to bed, locking the doors, finding themselves invaded in the middle of the night. This is Canada under 10 years of failed liberal soft on crime policies. So as it relates to bail in particular, I propose once Conservatives actually form government, it's not a if, it's going to be when Conservatives form government, we'll be introducing a whole host of changes to see a marked decrease ultimately in the level of criminal activity. But things that we can do now in opposition is to put the most pressure that we can on this current government to address bail reform. Over the last 4.5 years, Neil, the Liberal government has heard from every important stakeholder you can imagine. The premiers of every province and territory. We're talking premiers of a Conservative background, a Liberal background, an NDP background, all the above. We've heard from mayors of every small town, midtown, large city, metropolitan city across this country. We've heard from police chiefs. We've heard from presidents of police associations. We've heard from victim advocacy groups, community advocacy groups, and generally just Canadians crying out for the federal government to address the bail issues. Far too many, and this happens, Neil, every single day in every community, we have a very lax bail system that literally rewards repeat offending. And why, you might ask? Well, it goes back to 2018. 2018, when the then Prime Minister Justin Trudeau introduced Bill C-75. And Bill C-75 introduced a whole host of changes to the criminal justice system, but a portion of Bill 75 dealt with bail. And what 75 did was amend the criminal code under section 493.1 of the code.
Principle of
And
restraint.
they introduced a concept known as the principle of restraint. And what that said is that every judge, every justice of the peace that hears a bail application shall release the accused at the earliest opportunity on the least restrictive conditions. It didn't matter what the background of the accused was. It doesn't matter what the offense was. It doesn't matter what the carnage of the offense has done to the community or to the victim. It doesn't matter about the accused's criminal record, the criminal record that may consist of prior convictions of that current offense or prior convictions of breaching court orders such as bail, probation, community sentence orders. It doesn't matter whether or not that person is facing a number of other outstanding releases. What it says is that person must be released. It's almost a default position that is happening every single day in our courts. And that is why the repeat violent offenders that should be detained and held in custody until either they pled guilty or they had a trial and they were either convicted or found not guilty. There's a direct correlation statistically that when those repeat violent offenders are incarcerated, the crime rate does go down.
I got to jump in.
Yep.
I got to jump. So
Sure.
Say that again. The principle of restraint essentially requires that the law is on the side of the criminal, that the peace officers, the police, the judges especially, are severely restricted in how they can deal with these individual criminals, especially repeat criminals. Is that what you're telling me that the Liberals have done?
That's exactly, Neil, what I'm telling you that the Liberals have done, because I have spoken to retired judges. I have spoken to sitting judges, and they've all told me that their ability to exercise the appropriate discretion in a bail hearing has been taken away by the policy in the criminal code as amended by the Liberals that said you must consider a release as a default position. Now, don't get me wrong, Neil. This is not to say that every single person who's applying for bail is getting released. There are
Right.
still some detention orders, but the vast majority, I'm talking probably well over 80%, Neil, of those violent repeat offenders are being released because of Bill C-75 and the principle of restraint. And that is what those stakeholders have asked the government for the last 4+ years to remove. The government has refused to do that.
So let me ask you, what is Attorney General Sean Fraser's response to you when you speak to him about this? Because I know that you have.
Yeah, interesting you asked that. Well, I thought it would be prudent once Parliament returned after the last election at the end of May to reach out to my counterpart, to introduce myself, and to have a discussion about what our priorities are, in the hopes that our priorities were the priorities of the new Liberal government under Prime Minister Carney. So he and I had what I thought was a very productive meeting. It lasted just under an hour. I shared all my experiences as a practicing Crown attorney, literally being in the trenches on a weekly basis in bail court, in plea court, in trial court. And I specifically told him what has basically happened since 2018 and how easily this could change if he considered parsing out, removing the principle of restraint under 493.1. And I can't say that, he's got a good poker face. He didn't give me any indication that that was going to be on their radar map. He took good notes. He nodded appropriately. Basically, everything I said, he would take under advisement. But that was the end of May, Neil. And here we are at the beginning of August. We had a throne speech that talked about criminal justice reforms, making it harder for certain people who commit certain offenses from getting bail. I've listened to not only Sean Fraser, I've listened to Carney, I've listened to Minister Anti-Semitism, the Minister for Public Safety. I also heard from one of the deputy ministers. I call her the crime czar, Ruby Sahota. I've heard them all talk about we are taking community safety very seriously. We are taking the need for bail reform very seriously. And we will be introducing legislation to address these issues. Well, you know what, Neil? As politicians, we can walk and chew gum at the same time. There was nothing preventing this government from introducing appropriate legislation during our summer recess. How long do we have to wait? Community safety is not a bargaining chip. This is something that should have been a priority of this Liberal government for the last 10+ years. It hasn't been. So I said to myself, what can I do as a shadow minister? What can I do as a proud member of the Conservative Party other than trying to raise as much awareness about this issue? So, Neil, I know that you're familiar with petitions. As you know, petitions are generally introduced on a daily basis when Parliament is sitting. And as you know, all it takes is 25 signatures, and you can raise awareness about a particular issue of concern to not only a politician, but to a member of the public. So petitions are either initiated by members or initiated by Canadians right across this country. For the most part, the government pays lip service to petitions. They have to provide a response, but it's usually lip service. So I said to myself, what if I created a petition that went viral? What if I had a petition that I could generate close to, if not exceeding, 1 million Canadians? That would certainly get the message. And I said to myself, if I returned to Parliament in mid-September and I said to the Prime Minister at the first opportunity, you've had 4+ years to listen to the stakeholders that you should have been listening to, who've been asking for bail reform, and you've done nothing. How are you now going to turn down the will and wishes of 1 million+ Canadians that we all, as members of Parliament, all 343 of us, represent, who are telling you to do your job, keep us safe? The petition is online. It's going viral. I've got well over 50,000 signatures, Neil, already. I use this petition, I use this format, this podcast, to spread the message that I want people who are serious about community safety, and I can't think of anyone who's not serious about community safety. And this is why I suggested that this is not a partisan issue. Notwithstanding my political affiliation, everybody, regardless of political ideology, strives for a peaceful, safe community. And that's what this petition is calling for. And I'm hoping I can get close to 1 million people in just over a month, Neil, to say, government, do your job. We can't wait any longer.
Agreed. And Larry, we will be posting this petition on the podcast, of course. And
Thank you.
everybody, I am a believer that you have to support Larry, because in doing that, you're supporting yourself, your family. And again, it's not partisan, because the criminal element aren't knocking on your door to ask you what party you vote for before they do crime. So this affects everybody. I was brought up to believe, Larry, that either you're part of the problem or you're part of the solution. And frankly, I'm glad that you came on today, because personally, I don't know what the Liberals are doing. I don't believe that they're a group of criminal supporting individuals. I don't know if it's in their ideology. I don't know what they're doing, but they are not doing the job of a government in protecting Canadians in this area.
Let's face it, Neil, it's not just Carney, it's not just Trudeau, it's every Liberal Prime Minister that we have had. They don't have the same priority when it comes to criminal justice. Their priority is ensuring, and I think it's fair to say, as a former Crown attorney, my job wasn't always to secure convictions. My job was to ensure a fair trial and to produce and to share all the evidence, all the fruits of the investigation with the judge, so the judge can make a determination of the guilt or innocence of the party. So I'm not suggesting that the Liberal government is wrong in that approach, but they just seem to be so preoccupied with appeasing the offender, most often at the expense of the victim and the community. And 493.1, the principle of restraint, is just a classic example of their soft on crime approach. I could talk about Bill C5 from the 44th Parliament, which eliminated all the mandatory minimum penalties. As crazy as it sounds, we know that we've got a fentanyl crisis in this country, with literally overdoses happening on a daily basis. Fortunately, we've got people aware of what to look for. We've got naloxone to deal with overdose individuals who need medical attention. So we've got the tools, and we're reducing the numbers, but people are still accessing this poisonous substance. And people are supplying that. They're trafficking. They're making money. They're profiting from this poisonous approach that they're taking to Canadians. And one would think that a federal government would want to deal with those individuals extremely harshly to deter those individuals from doing it again, but also to send a broader message. You go down that road, there are going to be some serious penal consequences should you be convicted. So, for the life of me, I could never understand why the government, under Bill C-5 in the last parliament, eliminated every mandatory minimum penalty for all drug offenses, which means that that fentanyl trafficker, instead of serving his time or her time in a brick and mortar institution with steel bars, can ask the judge to serve their time in the comfort of their own home. The very same home, I might add, that they were trafficking the poison from. So really, where is the consequence? It is merely benefiting those criminals over and over again. That's another example of the liberals' soft on crime approach.
And can I ask you, Larry, and by the way, I just call it insidious insanity. That's actually how I define what you've just reported about the way that the government is treating law and order. But I want to ask you for a minute about the victims. You were quoted saying that Canada's justice system just simply leaves them out, especially during sentencing, bail hearings, early release decisions. With this government's approach to the problem, where are the victims in all of this? How are they being treated?
They're being treated like second-class citizens. It's just abysmal how poorly our current criminal justice system treats victims. And I work with some incredible victim advocacy groups. One of them is EVE, the acronym EVE, Ending Violence Everywhere, headed up by one of the most extraordinary, strong women that I have ever had the privilege of meeting. Her name is Kate Alexander, a victim herself, who is just leading the charge right across North America in ensuring that legislative changes address the ongoing pressing need to put victims first. I'm ultimately asking, Neil, this federal government to create a balance in our criminal justice system. Those victim groups I talk to, personal victims I speak to, and I speak to victims pretty much every single week, they don't view the criminal justice system as a justice system. They merely look at it as a legal system where they are afterthoughts by the police service that they are reporting to, afterthoughts by the Crown attorneys that they're working with, some of the victim groups that they're working with, by the judge, and ultimately by the federal government, who makes it abundantly easy for domestic violent offenders to never learn about the error of their ways, getting easy bail, getting soft sentences, getting paroled at very early opportunities. These are all ultimate things that this number of victim advocacy groups, particularly EVE, are looking for change. And I'm going to be a very proud advocate for all of those victim advocacy groups to ensure that their voices are heard so that we can get to a balanced system where the rights and protections of the accused under the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms are equally balanced with the rights, needs, and responsibilities of the community and the victim. That's what life was like pre-2018. I should say pre-2015, because it's been 10 years of bad liberal policy. But that's what life was like. And I'm sure we can get to that point again, Neil, with the appropriate government and the appropriate priorities.
Larry, and we encourage everybody again, stay up to date on this. Follow Larry Brock. Get that petition and sign it. Share this podcast. Make sure that you speak to people about this basic right of ours, which is safety. And Larry, I thank you for that. And I choose for a minute, if I can, to bring up, perhaps this is self-serving, but I have a question because I've been going through something as a senior, and I don't think I'm the only one. And for those of you who don't know, I'm a baby boomer, and I did not vote for the Liberals because everybody thinks that we all did. I know at least one who did it. So I'm a 71-year-old grandfather. I'm brought up in Canada. I'm a proud Canadian. But at the last election, I decided that I couldn't just vote. It wasn't enough. This is just for me, everybody. But I actually took a position, an employment position for a while with Member of Parliament Dan Muse, who was on this podcast a few months ago. I take it very seriously what's going on in this country. And Larry, talking about recent decisions by the Liberals, they appear to be, and if I'm wrong, I'm ready to be proven wrong, but they seem to be quite comfortable and somewhat supportive of growing anti-Semitism in Canada. And my question to you simply comes back to our topic. Larry, we have a lot of victims because of their religious background. And I'm not picking on any particular group, but I see the lack of absolute interest in the crime wave that's going on under the name of anti-Semitism, but it's still shooting bullets through schools, burning buses, having individuals attacked, seeing these demonstrations. And to my mind, the Liberals, and frankly, their friends in the NDP and the Green Party, haven't done anything about it. But doesn't this still fall, or shouldn't it fall under the criminal code and somebody be doing something about this?
Absolutely, Neil. And every opportunity I have to speak to law enforcement across this country, I raise that particular issue. I want to know what the problem is in that particular community, what the statistics are of demonstrations and hateful acts of violence, criminal acts of violence that you've just described, whether there are ongoing investigations, whether arrests have been made, whether the process has occurred in terms of either a guilty plea or a trial. So the most recent discussion I had was with the Toronto Police Chief, Myron Demkew. And it was a couple of weeks ago, and we talked about the rise of anti-Semitism. We talked about the demonstrations. He told me the amount of resources that he is actually deploying as a mayor of a large metropolitan city to address this issue and the cost. Now, the cost is a separate issue, but it was clear that there was a priority from that perspective of the top chief of a major police service in this country to prioritize what the criminal code provides. And all the things that you have described to me, Neil, are in fact criminal acts under the criminal code. He's informed me that a number of people, he wouldn't give me the exact number, I didn't ask for it actually, but a number of people have been arrested. A number of ongoing investigations are still being had, but unfortunately, no one has actually gone through the system to the very end, either with a finding of guilt or a finding or an acquittal after trial or even a guilty plea. So early days in terms of the participation in the criminal justice system, but at least it telegraphs to me that the police are exercising the tools that they have. Can those tools be better? Be better? No question about it. I think we can look for opportunities, Neil, to identify some gray areas. Pardon the pun. This is a gray matter podcast, but there are gray areas when it comes to hate crime in the criminal code. So I know, again, take it with a grain of salt, that the Carney government is talking about closing some of those gray loopholes in the criminal code. And I know that there's at least 3 conservative members who are working on private member bills to make it abundantly clear, not gray, but black and white, of ways that we can help law enforcement to address the ongoing criminality happening in cities, in towns right across this country. So it is on the radar map of police. They welcome the use of additional tools. I think it'll ultimately help the judiciary as well, because these are cases that are not often prosecuted. Neil, I was a prosecutor for almost 20 years. Now, Brantford's a different community, unlike Hamilton or Toronto, Montreal, or Vancouver, but I never had, and we've had some examples, I think, of some bias towards religious groups in my community, but I've never had the chance to prosecute any particular hate crime. I think as a whole, in the last couple of decades, the number of cases have been very minimal. But to your point, Neil, since October the 5th, there has been an exponential rise in demonstrations, disruptions, and criminality that needs to stop. So we as parliamentarians are going to use whatever tool that we can to raise this awareness, to bring it to the House at the earliest opportunity. Because again, I really can't trust the Liberal government to prioritize what needs to be done immediately. I totally get that the priority for this Liberal government was to deal with the economic tariff issue between our nation and the US. But to my point, we can walk and chew gum at the same time. There could have been other pieces of legislation that should have been introduced, particularly on the criminal justice end.
And thank you for that, Larry. And yes, I have to say, and I brought this up because I can't believe that I'm one of many people I speak to are wondering if our community, the Jewish community, has any future in Canada. And it is insane that that should even enter into our thought process. And I thank you for what you and all the people in the fight are doing to bring justice back to this country. I have to ask you, though, because, and I'll head towards the end with this, Larry, but in my research, I found out that in your writing, you launched a youth justice essay contest, and you were asking high school students how they would prevent crime. I'm curious, what did the kids tell you, Larry?
That's a tough question, Neil. I probably received maybe a dozen responses to that contest. We probably reviewed them all, but we basically chose the top 4 or 5 and then ultimately chose the winner. Largely, if I can remember correctly, this goes back a number of years, largely dealt with homelessness. It dealt with mental health. It dealt with opiate abuses. It did not deal with criminality broadly that I've been speaking to you about. At least I don't recall that to be the case. But then again, the conversation that Canadians were having then versus now about criminality really wasn't on the same radar map, the same priority. So ultimately, I believe it was that the winner very, very astutely talked about creative ways the criminal justice system can look at, alternative ways of dealing with mental health, the intersection between mental health deficits, lack of employment, lack of supports, which lead obviously to homelessness, which then lead to criminality, whether or not those individuals should be treated to the strictness of the law or whether there are opportunities for the Crown and or the courts to divert those individuals to ensure that they had the supports that they needed to not go down that path again. So very creative. I think the winner was a grade 11 student. So someone who was 16 years of age, 16 or 17 years of age, put a lot of work into it and very creative solutions to a real world problem.
It sounds like something to be done again in our school system because, justice isn't about what happens after crime. It's about teaching people to prevent it, I would think. And
Absolutely.
therefore, it seems like the right thing to you. And
Yeah.
kudos to
Yeah.
you for doing it. Larry,
Yeah.
I hope and I look forward to and I expect the Conservative Party of Canada to become the government. More importantly, I hope that you will become our Justice Minister, our Attorney General, that you will continue to lead. And I can't thank you enough for coming on today. I open it again to you, Larry. If there's anything else you want to say as we close, please do. Please continue.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you for that, Neil. And obviously, I would be happy to serve in whatever capacity our future Conservative Prime Minister would deem appropriate. It would be the honor of a lifetime, of course, to be chosen as the next Attorney General. To summarize, Neil, I thank you for the opportunity. It's all about channeling all the concerns that we have as Canadians. Everyone sees it. Again, you don't have to be a conservative to feel that something is wrong with our criminal justice system. There is a solution. This is not going to be a one-size-fits-all solution. This is a solution among many steps that need to be taken, in my view, as I spoke about a few times in this podcast, to achieve that equilibrium balance so that we have a justice system that is admired around the world, that promotes community safety, elevates victims as a true participant in a justice system, but also holds offenders accountable with the appropriate sentences so that they can be rehabilitated, Neil, and become deterred from ever committing that act again. That is going to be our ultimate goal.
Well, thank you, Larry. Agreed and agreed. And ladies and gentlemen, if you have comments, we want to see them. If you have questions for Mr. Brock, you can certainly connect with him through his offices or send those questions to us at the Your Grey Matters podcast, and we will immediately send them off to Mr. Brock. Mr. Brock, Larry, bless your heart. Keep going. And if we at the podcast can do anything else to help, please let us know.
Truly appreciate, Neil, the opportunity of speaking something that I'm so passionate about, and looking forward to further discussions with you in the future.
Thank you. Thank you. And everybody, thanks for tuning in. Please like, please subscribe if you haven't, and we will see you again soon on the Your Grey Matters podcast. I'm Neil Silvert. Thanks for watching. If you found it interesting and you liked it, give us a thumbs up. If you're ready to subscribe, click right here. And if you'd like to see another episode, click right here. Tell a friend. Send us comments. Thanks a lot.